Pikmin 3 is an incredibly polished game. There's no doubt about that. In the already incredible Pikmin series, its smoothness sets it apart as a standout, and its new Pikmin types are dynamic and exciting to use, setting themselves clearly apart from their predecessors. However, given the linear nature of this game, there's a lot of emergent gameplay and cool combinations of things the game simply never will let the players try. For example, did you know that the Armor Maldad's shell can be broken by bomb rocks rather than just rock Pikmin? Nor did I until I saw it happen, since this is physically impossible to do in a linear main story or side modes. The original Pikmin 1 and 2, after a certain point, became a pretty open and freeform set of games, allowing the players to tackle what they want in any particular order, though this only happens once you've unlocked every Pikmin type. Pikmin 3's much more rigid framework does allow this by the very end. Once you've unlocked the blue Pikmin, a type that appears so late in the story that it feels the game is just prodding you to get on with the end of the main story rather than letting you play with your now full toolbox. So what if the next Pikmin game wasn't so linear? Many, upon seeing the Pikmin 4 trailer, have been claiming that it seems to be open world. What could this freedom look like? My name is Vantage Emblem, and we're going to talk about this today. I've talked about a similar topic to this before in my first video on the channel actually, but today I'm more focused on the emergent gameplay that can come from a truly open Pikmin. If you'd like to check out that first video, I'll put it in the card in the top right. That being said, without further ado, let's get into it. Pikmin has always been broken up into different areas. Pikmin 1 had 5, Pikmin 2 4, and Pikmin 3 once again had 5. And they're always unlocked and played in a very specific order, one at a time. This means that you are led from one Pikmin type to another in a linear sequence based on how you tackle these areas. You need yellow Pikmin to break down the gate to unlock blue Pikmin in Pikmin 2, for example, and you need rock Pikmin to defeat the armored Maldad to unlock the distant tundra where you encounter the yellow Pikmin in Pikmin 3. There's not really any flexibility here, and I believe that we could see the structure change dramatically in the future, perhaps with Pikmin 4, and lead to a more open Pikmin game. There are 3 ways I can see the upcoming Pikmin game being more open. The first is akin to Starcraft 2, a popular real-time strategy game, which for the uninitiated is a very similar genre to Pikmin. In this game, the player is free to choose between 1 or 2 different areas in that game's campaign, planets, to go to at a time. This slowly allows them to unlock new units, like Pikmin types, in whatever order they see fit from the few options available. The second option for a more open Pikmin is akin to Breath of the Wild. This would likely be a connected world with different landing sites and different challenges all attached on the same map. You could freely go to any place and unlock any Pikmin or upgrade in any order. You could go to the final area potentially as soon as you start, or maybe it's locked by needing all Pikmin types or by defeating certain bosses or collecting certain items. Either way, it's so much more open than the games are now. The third and final option, and probably my favorite, is akin to Megaman. In the classic platformer series, there's a variety of stages, and each of them are separate and can be tackled in any order. The final level unlocking after you've bested all of the game's bosses in whatever order you choose. Let's see if we can visualize each approach. Approach 1. Starcraft 2. Let's start with Approach 1. Based on Starcraft 2. If Pikmin 4 is divided into areas like classic Pikmin games, imagine unlocking a choice of 2 or 3 areas at once with a radar expansion or some equivalent upgrade in Pikmin 4. This would serve the same function as, say, the spherical atlas or data glutton items from previous games. Once you acquired this item, you'd get to pick from 1 or 2 different areas, and that would be the next stage you'd tackle, and it would determine what new Pikmin types you'd discover next. However, you only have 1 radar upgrade, so once you pick an area, you are locked into that area, plus any previous areas you have visited, until you have beat the boss at the end of the most recently unlocked area. Jumping back to the first area for a second, I feel like if, in Pikmin 4, all classic Pikmin types were to return, you could perhaps encounter the primary 3 all in the starting area. You would probably start with reds, a series staple, then find yellows, which can first demonstrate their abilities by being thrown up high, maybe aided by the new gameplay perspective. Finally, to escape the walled opening garden, you may need to bring a group of Pikmin through a body of water, blue Pikmin being the key to unlocking this place. Perhaps all of these Pikmin could be together in the Master Onion, formed as you unlock their separate onions, just like Pikmin 3. Once you escape the opening area, you now have the freedom to select which area you want to go to next. Perhaps you could freely go to just 2 areas, and either of these will have a new onion to collect. One of these areas could have one of the new Pikmin types in the game, say a tall green Pikmin immune to acid for argument's sake, and maybe another could be a legacy Pikmin, say rock Pikmin. You would select an area, go to it, unlock the Pikmin, defeat the boss. During this flow, you can freely go back to areas you've already unlocked and use your new Pikmin types to uncover certain secrets. All of this is very similar to the Starcraft 2 campaign screen, where you can freely tackle different planets in a still somewhat linear order. This could dramatically change the makeup of your army, encourage replayability, and greatly spice up the order you visit places on each playthrough, keeping things a little fresh. Not only that, but it could spice up the gameplay in general. Imagine fighting a boss that is fairly easy with wing Pikmin, but much more challenging if you instead selected rock Pikmin or some other combination of factors. It could drastically change player experiences and create moments where, for faster runs, creative play and clever backtracking can win the day. Picking an area locks you out of the other one until you defeat said boss and unlock another range expander, which allows you to go to either A, any areas you decided against going to before, which are options, or B, perhaps 1 or 2 more new areas. As you explore, maybe 1 or 2 of these areas are big caverns similar to the Forest Navel, and these cavernous spaces could be the home of purple and white Pikmin. You would then repeat the process of defeating a boss and unlocking a range expander, and these would net you 2 final areas that have winged Pikmin, with a new niche of homing in on targets above you given the new camera angle, and the final new Pikmin type of the game in the process. Let's say, for example, short orange Pikmin immune to explosions. Once you have defeated enough of the bosses, requiring collecting some of, maybe not all of the Pikmin types, but probably at least requiring the new Pikmin types, the way to the final area opens. In allowing this free-form approach, you may miss certain Pikmin. This is okay. Perhaps the final area gives you a limited supply of Bulbmin, if only in that space, and this should allow you to clear through the hazards you need and finish the game. You'll fight the final boss with up to 10 Pikmin types, including the Bulbmin, and you can finish the game that way. Approach 2. Breath of the Wild. Let's continue to Approach 2, based on The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. In this approach, we differ from classic Pikmin games. There's no need to get any data gluttons or atlases or anything like that to expand the radar, since there is quite literally no separate areas. Everything is now interconnected. Instead, you're going from place to place claiming new landing sites where you may land your ship and onions at the start of each day. These will be used as a home base throughout the duration of the day, and you can freely select which one to come back to. This would allow you to essentially fast travel at the beginning of each day, but very organically in a way that doesn't break immersion. When you land, you get a glimpse of the area around you from an aerial view, much like the landing cutscenes in the first 3 Pikmin games. In this way, these landing sites essentially serve the same function as the towers from Breath of the Wild as a vantage point,
Hey, that's me.
and as a fast travel point. Once again assuming all Pikmin types would return, I feel like the starting area could still resemble what we detailed in Approach 1. You could perhaps still encounter just the primary 3 all in the starting area, but you can get them in any order, like the shrines in Breath of the Wild. The way out of the area is perhaps blocked behind something requiring reds, yellows, and blues to overcome. Assuming you must start with red since it is the series staple, the way out may just require getting both yellows and blues. There could be multiple base locations in the starting location, but like the Great Plateau in Breath of the Wild, it could serve as a tutorial region isolated from any extreme threats. After escaping the first area, you now have the freedom to select which area you go to next. Instead of having to choose between a few limited areas, however, the newly interconnected map would let you go to any objective at once by organically exploring and get any Pikmin type in any order. There will be many side challenges and objectives gated behind different Pikmin types, so it's in your best interest to collect them as quickly as possible, with some of them barred behind great challenges such as puzzles or walls. However, if the game wants, it could do the classic Pikmin trope of gating Pikmin behind other types as well, allowing a still somewhat linear flow where collecting a few Pikmin types has to happen after collecting a different set of Pikmin. Once again, this free flow would have an impact on encounters. A boss that attacks with large crystals suddenly becomes a much greater threat without rock Pikmin. The return of the new and otherwise more dangerous man-at-legs is perhaps trivialized by having a great deal of orange Pikmin in your squad, immune to its barrage, or wing Pikmin that can charge directly at its core. An optional Wraith boss is otherwise unstoppable, but bested in an instant by your purples. After acquiring some, all, or most of the Pikmin types, the new player would find their way en route to the final zone of the interconnected map. Perhaps the final area requires gathering a few items to unlock, similar to how the Divine Beast of Breath of the Wild affect the final boss fight, but in a more locked-in gated sense. Or perhaps it is just as open as Breath of the Wild, where one could theoretically charge right to the boss. There, you'll find Bulbmen, and they'll bring you up to 10 total Pikmin types. You bring 10 of each into the battle, they sing together, and you wallop the final boss. Sounds fun to me. Approach 3. Classic Megaman. Let's continue to our final approach, based on the classic series of Megaman games. This approach is a middle ground of the last two approaches. In this approach, we'd see Pikmin 4 divided into areas like classic Pikmin games, with a new Pikmin type and a boss at the end of each. After defeating the boss, you'd carry back a new treasure that allows you to expand your search into a new area. The starting area would be very similar to Approach 1 and Approach 2's starting areas, tightly crafted to require red, yellow, and blue Pikmin to get out and serving as the game's more or less safe tutorial area. After completing it, you'd get a radar expansion kit and the ability to choose your first new area. Here's where things differ from approach number 1. You get to freely choose your next area from any of the areas you have yet to unlock, save for the final one. And you'd get to go there, unlock a new Pikmin type or two, and then freely go back and forth from that area and any previous ones between days, backtracking and solving puzzles until you defeat the current area's boss and unlock a new radar expansion. It's honestly not too different from the way Pikmin flows currently. Once you've done that, all of the areas are open again, but you can only pick one. When you go to explore that area, you get a new Pikmin, beat the boss, get the expansion kit, and keep going until you've got all Pikmin types and defeated all bosses. Only then does the final area open. This is just like in classic Mega Man games, where there are multiple stages to tackle, and you can freely tackle them in any order. Once you get to the end of the stage, you defeat a boss, and then you acquire an upgrade from defeating the boss, called a special weapon. Once this happens, you can now use that upgrade to take on different stages, making them far easier because you have that new special weapon. Just like in Approach 1, this preserves the tightly crafted area layouts of previous Pikmin games and allows for a diverse set of assets and biomes for players to look at. And just like Approach 2, this preserves the true freeform nature of being able to tackle the challenges and bosses of the game in whatever order you'd like, save for the final boss, rendering certain bosses more or less difficult depending on the Pikmin at hand. The game would need to be tightly designed here, however, to make it so you're never soft-locked for not having the correct Pikmin type. Since you can't back out and choose a new area, the boss will need to have some way to be bested with only the main 3 Pikmin types and the Pikmin types available in the boss's area. However, there could definitely be Pikmin types from other areas that could help make the boss fight much easier. A good example of this could be the Behemoth boss bat from Pikmin 3. It requires yellow Pikmin to fight, and you're never actually able to fight it with winged Pikmin. If the game were more freeform, however, you could potentially bring wing Pikmin, and they could make short work of it in the air, rendering it a much easier boss fight and skipping the whole light mechanic. Another example could be based on the Armored Maldad Bomb Rock experience from earlier, where instead of using rock Pikmin to shatter the shell, you have to carefully place bomb rocks. It's much harder, but totally possible. You could see an enemy like the beady Longlegs, which is most vulnerable to attacks from yellow or winged Pikmin, since they can reach its body at all times, become much more dangerous when it's not fully lowered and exposed. This is similar to the sequence breaking of Metroid games, or the super effective nature of special weapons from the Robot Masters in Mega Man games. After collecting all or most of the Pikmin types, the final zone would become available. Once again, you'd get access to Bulbmen, and you'd bring 10 of each of the 10 types of Pikmin into battle. They'd sing together, and you'd finally defeat the looming final battle and finish this long-anticipated title. These 3 approaches all accomplish the same thing, of revolutionizing the area selection system of Pikmin, but they're all doing it in very different ways. I could genuinely see any of these systems adapted for a Pikmin game in the future, if not for Pikmin 4. However, I see some problems with each of them that could echo throughout gameplay. I could see all three of these existing with caves, structured in all approaches like a mix between the caves of Pikmin 2 and the shrines of Breath of the Wild, or entirely caveless. Either way, only time and more trailers will tell. That being said, which approaches do you like the best? Are there any you'd really not like to see? Do you just want the classic Pikmin map selection style back, or are you excited for something new? Let me know in the comments below, and when you do, remember to subscribe and like. That being said, I'll stop rambling and end things here. My name's VantageEmblem, I hope you enjoyed the video and had a good day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.